We, the elves, were the epitome of civilization, the peak of all that could be accomplished by an intelligent race. The creation saw fit to bestow our universe, our Earth, with limitless magical potential. We were practically gods among the beasts of our world. With training and resources, we can mold the world to our design. Our millennia-long lifespans granted us ample time for the first, but as we grew in number, sufficient materials began to grow scarce. With our true mastery of the arcane, we built a bridge to another world. A world much like our own, but something in the distant past had changed. This new Earth was lush and vibrant. Life thrived everywhere one looked, and simply breathing felt nourishing. We met other elves much like ourselves, but they were deeply spiritual in manner. Though the magic of their world was strong, they used it only to perpetuate the growth that engulfed their world, sparing only the minimum needed to sustain themselves. We tried to treat with them, but they dismissed our attempts to teach them how to make use of the abundance they so foolishly ignored. As such, we saw no other choice than to tame their wild world by force. The Earth we found next was far more barren than the last, or even our own. Rich in raw materials, but there was far less to be found in the form of growth. The people of this Earth were more organized in form, but more brutal in nature. They warred frequently, using their magic to hide among the shadows of their world from predators, prey, and each other. They were similar to us as well, but of a far darker complexion, much like the rest of the life that managed to persist there, likely stained by the dry skies that bore clouds of only ash. As such, we deemed them the Dark Elves, in contrast to the Wood Elves of the forested Earth, and of course became the High Elves ourselves. Many of them welcomed us with the new power we brought them. Those that did not were not around for much longer. As we continued to extend our bridge to more and more Earths, we found even more versions of ourselves that could have been. Elves whose world was frozen and knew nothing but ice and snow their whole lives. Elves who had become corrupted and twisted by dark magics and become grotesque orcish beings. Elves that ceased to be elves long ago, having used their magics to meld with the beasts of the world as centaurs or merfolk. The ages brought more worlds to our growing empire, and a trend was noticed in the gradual decrease of magic found in each new plane of existence. The worlds of the industrious dwarves were full of magic, but it remained buried in the bowels of the earth until they dug it out. The giants, that were little more than beasts themselves, were sustained solely by the magic that bound their immensely heavy forms together. The crafty gnomes and mischievous goblins were each born by magical means, but themselves near incapable of harnessing the energy that gave them life. It had been expected for centuries that we would eventually converge in a world where magic reached a minimum, for a world without magic simply could not exist. With dozens of wars fought against foes of lesser magic, we thought there would be little to prepare for as we neared the threshold. The last race to be subjugated were simple cave peoples with stocky frames and large brows. A tribal, nomadic people whose world was almost entirely devoid of magic except for a magical trait, most easily described as luck, preventing them from meeting an untimely end. Although they were quick learners, they seemed to lack any concept of creativity or generational learning, and thus teaching their young ourselves made for a simple assimilation into the Empire. Despite the steady degradation of magical potential exuded by each universe, nothing stood in our way. All races eventually succumbed to our superiority and took their place in the Empire. This came to an end, however, when the most clear prediction produced the unpredictable. The final convergence led to the world of humans, a race who had developed with absolutely no magical potential whatsoever. Our arrival on the human plane was met with astonishment by both parties. When the bridge opened, the small team of scouts stepped into the center of what was clearly a large enclosed market. What seemed to be the grand hall was surrounded by stalls of food in such abundance and variety that rivaled even the capital. The elite magus in command of the scout unit detected absolutely no magical energy anywhere near the bridge. Despite this, the lighting was so radiant that the Dark Elves found no shadows to hide in. The air was cool as if wind magic were in constant use, and there seemed to be faint music coming from everywhere despite no instruments in sight. Most immediately worrisome, though, were the people. The hall was filled with dozens of people whose eyes held an intellect to rival the High Elves. It was a gaze that carried a hunger for more knowledge than the elven scouts likely possessed. Before they could decide on the appropriate course of action, however, there was a sudden eruption of thunder from the hand of a human that tore holes through two of the scouts. The remaining scouts immediately retaliated, believing it to be some form of fire magic. In the ensuing chaos, the scouts used what magic they could produce from their own life force to put down any of the natives that looked threatening in any way, and sent word back for the bridge to send reinforcements. The Empire's immediate mobilization garnered a quick foothold in this new world. Expanding beyond the walls of the immense indoor market, the Imperial army was surprised to find palaces of glass extending into the horizon. It was as if we had walked into the very center of the capital world itself. But beyond the physical marvels they witnessed, there continued to be no evidence of magic on this world. Even the Imperial Magus Militant couldn't make sense of how such a place could exist. The Imperial Army's progress was cut short before they reached the first horizon, not that they could have seen the horizon beyond the towers anyway. At first, resistance was unexpectedly strong, but not troubling. The natives of this realm seemed to have found a way to imbue magic into some sort of crude instruments that made deafening noise and pierce our armor with small metal stones. They were certainly effective, and forced us to alter our strategies, but seemed to only be held by few individuals, primarily in blue garb, that were assumed to be the City Watch. As we expanded outward, we continued to observe more wonders of this new Earth. Glass paintings of every shape and size that depicted vibrant, moving images and words that made no sense to our eyes. As soon as the dwarves and gnomes attached to the army to maintain their arms, they immediately took frenzy with the sights that befell them, declaring the humans masters of machination. A nonsensical proposal, we thought. Although the principles of machination were known to us through our conquest of the lesser peoples, they have proven far less reliable or capable than magic. What need do we have for bows and arrows if one can throw a spear with their mind? What need do we have for ropes and pulleys when a simple wave of the hand can raise a heavy cart into the sky? What need do we have for burning foul and dirty coal when one can produce a clean flame in the palm? These concepts seem trivial to the Empire. So after the conquest of each of the lesser peoples, only the magics and tools found to be especially useful were kept. Anything deemed unnecessary was discarded, and their creators put to use elsewhere. Had we heeded the words of the smiths and crafters, we might have been prepared for the onslaught that would follow. The humans did not take long to muster their own armies. In fact, the suddenness with which they arrived seemed almost clairvoyant. It was as if they knew where we were at all times. They struck from the shadows, and they struck from the sky. A roaring, the likes of which we had never seen before, erupted through the once neatly kept streets woven amongst the gleaming towers. Overhead, what looked to be massive birds flew past at speeds so great, it seemed as if the very sound of their fury struggled to keep up. Then large menacing metal beasts that hovered like insects appeared from between the city structures at the head of our main advance. Recognizing them as beasts of war, the Magus Militant immediately ordered they be struck with fire. It was a foolhardy mistake that cost his life, and the life of every soldier and mage in the front line. The roar of the insect tore through our army like a barmaid clearing the table of crumbs. So much smoke and fire and noise that our forces would have fared better had they challenged the god of the seas to open combat. The carnage was not limited to the front, however. Suddenly, as if with one mind, enemy soldiers erupted from every street and attacked from every window. Their instruments of destruction pierced even the strongest of wards. Their synchronicity, unmatched by even the most well-trained battle groups. They quickly reclaimed their city, all the way back to the grand market in which we first arrived. They didn't stop there. They entered the bridge to the earth of the cave people, and at the sight of their enslavement were disgusted, for they saw them as their kin. They liberated them, and proceeded to chase the Imperial forces across each bridge from world to world, month by month, seemingly growing stronger as they neared the higher planes. This continued until they ultimately arrived at the first of the Elven worlds. Seeing the writing on the walls and the crumbling of an empire millennia in the making, the Empress had the Grand Magus executed and sued for peace. The peace talks were unprecedented, an event that hosted nobles from across the Empire and several members of human leadership. The humans also insisted on having a delegation from each of the lesser races, demanding they all meet as equals. Had the Empress had any ground on which to stand, she might have protested, disgusted by the thought of breaking bread with lesser peoples, but the humans had made it clear who the true superior beings were, if not in words, certainly in action. The talks ended with the division of the realms. The Elven peoples retained their empire, but it was constrained to the original 5 Elven worlds. The Beast peoples had long since overlapped in their realms and created a pact of worlds. The dwarves retained their own world and that of the simple giants. The barbarous, orcish, and ogrish peoples were declared independent, as they each wished to return to war, but knew better than to challenge their betters. As was the goblin world, for war and peace were undefinable concepts to their minds. The gnomes kept to themselves, but maintained close trade ties with the dwarves and humans. The humans, for their part, could have claimed the whole of the empire if they so desired, but receded to their home with the addition of the cave peoples they believed were an extension of themselves, calling them Neanders. When the humans were first discovered, the elven scholars couldn't make sense of how such a people could possibly exist, let alone become so powerful. They scoured every ancient text they could find across every world they had conquered. They searched for any clues about the seemingly undetectable magic the humans had to be using that must be the fabric holding their world together. The entire time they'd been blind to the true answer, which had been plain to see from the moment they set foot on their Earth. While most races learned to will fire into existence or steal from nature, only the humans had learned to make it with sticks and stones. While most races either hid from their predators or killed them, only the humans tamed theirs. While many races imbued magic into mindless golems or inanimate objects, only the humans harnessed lightning to teach rocks how to think. Without magic providing any means of survival for their kind, the humans were ultimately forced to invent their own.